Park Tae-ho was lying under an old cargo ship when his communicator started beeping. He ignored it at first. The ship above him was leaking fuel from a cracked pipe, and he needed to fix it before the whole thing caught fire. His hands moved fast, twisting bolts and sealing joints with the kind of speed that came from 30 years of practice. The communicator beeped again. Then again. Then it would not stop. Tae-ho sighed and rolled out from under the ship. He wiped his greasy hands on his worn jacket and looked at the small device on his wrist. The screen showed a symbol he had never seen before in his life. It was the seal of the Galactic Concordat, the government that ruled over 2,000 different species across the galaxy. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he pressed the button to accept the call. A face appeared on the screen. It was not human. The creature had gray skin, large black eyes, and a mouth that seemed too wide for its face. Tae-ho had seen many aliens in his years working at the orbital station, but this one wore the uniform of a Concordat official. That was rare. That was very rare. Park Tae-ho of Earth? The alien asked. His voice was flat and cold. Yes, Tae-ho said. That is me. You have been selected for an emergency assignment. The ship requires your skills. You will board the transport vessel that arrives at your station in 4 hours. You will not refuse. Tae-ho blinked. What ship? What is the problem? The alien paused. For a moment, something strange crossed its face. It almost looked like fear. The ship is called the Eternal Drift, the alien said. It is the largest vessel ever built, 40 kilometers long, 3 million souls on board. And it is dying. Tae-ho felt his stomach drop. He had heard stories about the Eternal Drift. Everyone had. It was not just a ship. It was a flying city, a world unto itself. It carried diplomats and scientists and families from hundreds of different species. It was a symbol of everything the Concordat stood for. What happened to it? Tae-ho asked. The quantum fold drive has failed. The ship is drifting toward a gravity well. In 6 cycles, it will be pulled in and crushed. Everyone on board will die. Tae-ho was quiet. He understood what a gravity well was. It was like a drain in space, pulling everything toward it with impossible force. Nothing that went in ever came out. Why me? He asked. I'm just a mechanic. I fix cargo ships and transport vessels. I have never even seen a quantum fold drive. The alien leaned closer to the screen. Because we have tried everything else. The best engineers from 12 different species have examined the drive. They have run every test. They have used every tool. They have found nothing. The drive should be working, but it is not. And you think I can do better than them? No, the alien said. I think you will do something different. Humans do not work like other species. You do not trust your machines. You do not trust your data. You trust your hands, your instincts. We have heard stories about human mechanics. They say you can hear things that sensors cannot detect. They say you can feel when something is wrong, even when every reading says it is fine. Tae-ho shook his head slowly. Those are just stories. I am not magic. I am just a man who has spent his whole life fixing things. Then spend the last 6 cycles of the Eternal Drift's existence fixing it, the alien said. The transport will arrive in 4 hours. Be ready. The screen went dark. Tae-ho stood alone in his small repair shop, surrounded by tools and spare parts and the smell of engine grease. He looked at his hands. They were rough and scarred, covered in old burns and fresh cuts. These were the hands of a worker, not a hero, but 3 million people were going to die if he did not try. He packed a small bag. He did not have much. Some clothes, some basic tools, and one special item, an old wrench that had belonged to his grandfather. It was nothing fancy, just simple steel, made on Earth over 100 years ago. But Taiho had carried it with him his whole life. It felt right in his hand, like an extension of his own body. 4 hours later, he boarded the transport vessel. It was small and fast, designed to cross great distances in short time. The pilot was an alien with 4 arms and scales like a fish. It did not speak to him. It just flew. Taiho sat by the window and watched the stars pass by. He thought about his life. He had never been important. He had never done anything that mattered to anyone except the people whose ships he fixed. He was 61 years old, and he had accepted long ago that he would die as he had lived. Quietly, alone, forgotten dot, but now the whole galaxy was watching. Now everything depended on him dot. After many hours, the pilot's voice came through the speakers. "We are approaching the eternal drift. Look out your window." Taiho looked out at first. He saw nothing. Just empty space and distant stars. Then a shadow began to grow. It blocked out the stars one by one, spreading across his view like a great dark cloud. And then lights appeared, thousands of them, millions of them. Tiny points of brightness covering a shape so massive that his mind could not understand it. The eternal drift was not a ship. It was a world. It stretched from one end of his vision to the other, and still he could not see all of it. Towers rose from its surface like mountains. Domes glowed with the light of artificial suns. And at its heart, he could see the faint pulse of the quantum fold drive, beating like a dying heart. Taiho's hands began to tremble. He gripped the armrest of his seat and tried to make them stop. But they would not obey him. They shook and shook, and he did not know if it was fear or something else entirely. The transport moved closer, and the shadow swallowed them whole. The transport landed in a docking bay so large that Taiho could not see the ceiling. Ships of every shape and size filled the space around him. Some were small personal craft, no bigger than a room. Others were cargo vessels that could carry enough food to feed a city for a year. And all of them were trapped here, waiting for someone to save them. Taiho stepped off the transport and felt the artificial gravity pull at his legs. It was stronger than he was used to, made for species bigger and heavier than humans. He would have to work harder just to stand straight. A group of aliens was waiting for him. At the front stood a creature nearly 3 meters tall, with green scales and eyes like yellow fire. It wore a uniform covered in medals and symbols of rank. This was Commander Vec, the captain of the Eternal Drift. Behind him stood others. There was a 4-armed alien with blue skin and a face that showed no expression. There was a small creature that floated in the air, its body made of something that looked like smoke. And there was a young alien with bright orange eyes and thin fingers that never stopped moving. "Commander." Vec looked down at Taiho. The human felt very small under that gaze. "You are the mechanic," Vec said. It was not a question. "Yes," Taiho said. "I am Park Taiho. I know who you are. I know what you are. A human from a species that has only been in space for 300 years. Your people still use chemical rockets on some of your worlds. You have never built anything larger than a small station." Vec paused. "And yet, you are supposed to save my ship." Taiho did not look away. "I will try." The 4-armed alien stepped forward. Her voice was sharp and cold. "I am Lyra, chief engineer of this vessel. I have worked on quantum fold drives for over 200 years. I have led teams of the finest minds in the galaxy. We have run every test, checked every system, examined every component. There is nothing wrong with this drive. It should be working perfectly. But it is not working," Taiho said. Lyra's 4 hands clenched into fists. "No, it is not. And I am supposed to believe that you, a primitive from a primitive world, will find what we could not?" Taiho looked at her calmly. He had faced doubt before. Every time he worked on a ship that other mechanics had given up on, he faced the same looks, the same words. It did not bother him anymore. "I would like to see the engine," he said. Lyra laughed. It was not a kind sound. "The engine? You mean the quantum fold drive? It is not an engine, human. It is a machine that bends the fabric of reality itself. It creates a fold in space that moves the ship from one point to another without crossing the distance between. The mathematics alone would take your species 1,000 years to understand." "I do not need to understand the mathematics," Taiho said. "I just need to see it." Commander Vec raised one massive hand. "Enough, Lyra. We have no time for arguments. Take him to the drive. Let him look. What harm can it do?" Lyra's eyes burned with anger, but she said nothing. She turned and walked away, and Taiho followed her. The young alien with orange eyes fell into step beside him. "I am Kale," the creature said. Its voice was lighter than the others, almost friendly. "I am a junior technician. I have been assigned to help you." "Thank you, Kale," Taiho said. "Do not thank me yet. I do not think you can help us. But I am curious to see what you will do. Humans are strange. Everyone says so." They walked for a long time. The eternal drift was so big that they had to take 3 different transport tubes just to reach the engineering section. Along the way, Taiho saw wonders that he could not have imagined. Parks filled with plants from 100 different worlds. Markets where aliens bought and sold goods that glowed and moved and sang. Children playing games in zero-gravity chambers, laughing in languages he did not understand. 3 million souls. 3 million lives depending on him. His hands trembled again. He pushed them into his pockets and kept walking. Finally, they reached a massive door. It was made of metal so thick that Taiho could not guess its weight. Warning symbols covered its surface in dozens of different languages. Lyra placed her hand on a scanner, and the door began to open. The sound hit him first. A deep hum that he felt in his bones, in his teeth, in the space behind his eyes. It was the sound of power beyond measure, energy that could reshape reality itself. Then he saw it. The quantum fold drive was not a machine. It was a city. It rose before him like a mountain made of light and metal, stretching up and up until it disappeared into darkness. Pipes and cables and conduits wrapped around it like veins around a heart. Platforms floated at different levels, carrying technicians who looked like insects next to its impossible size. At its center, something glowed. It was not any color Taiho could name. It was every color at once, shifting and changing, beautiful and terrible. This was the fold itself, the place where reality bent and broke and reformed. Taiho's legs grew weak. He had to grab the railing to keep himself standing. Kel watched him with curious eyes. "Your hands are shaking, human." Taiho nodded slowly. Yes, his hands were shaking. They had not stopped since he first saw the ship. But now they shook even harder, because now he understood something that the others did not. The machine was screaming. He could not hear it with his ears. No sensor would detect it. But he felt it through his palms where they gripped a metal railing. He felt it through the solace of his feet where they touched the floor. The quantum fold drive was crying out in pain, begging someone to listen, begging someone to help. And no one could hear it but him. Lyra stood beside him with her arms crossed. "Well, human? What do you see? A machine too complex for your simple mind?" Taiho did not answer. He was listening. The scream came from somewhere deep inside the drive, somewhere the technicians had not thought to look. It was small and quiet, hidden beneath the roar of power that surrounded it. But it was there. He turned to Lyra. "How long do we have?" 5 cycles, she said. "Maybe less." Taiho looked back at the drive. 5 cycles to find a problem that no one else could see. 5 cycles to save 3 million lives. His hands would not stop trembling. But he understood now that they were not trembling from fear. They were trembling because they already knew what to do. He just had to listen to them. Taiho stood before the quantum fold drive for a long time. He did not move. He did not speak. He just watched and listened and felt. The alien engineers around him grew restless. They whispered to each other in languages he did not understand. Some pointed at him and laughed. Others shook their heads in disappointment. The human was useless. Their faces said, "We knew he would be." Lyra finally lost patience. "Well, are you going to do something, or are you just going to stand there like a statue?" Taiho turned to look at her. "I need you to turn everything off." Lyra blinked all 4 of her eyes. "What?" "The diagnostic systems. The sensor arrays. The monitoring stations. All of it. I need you to turn it all off." For a moment, Lyra did not respond. Then she laughed, louder and harder than before. "You are insane. Without those systems, we cannot see what is happening inside the drive. We would be completely blind." "Yes," Taiho said. "That is what I want. Why? What possible reason could you have for wanting to work blind?" Taiho looked back at the massive machine. "Because your systems are too loud. They fill the air with noise, and the noise is hiding what I need to hear." Lyra stepped closer to him. Her forearms spread wide in disbelief. "The systems make no sound. They are completely silent." "Not to me," Taiho said quietly. The chief engineer stared at him. Her face showed confusion, then anger, then something that might have been fear. She opened her mouth to argue. "Do it." The voice came from behind them. Commander Vec had arrived, his massive form filling the doorway. He looked at Taiho with those yellow eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps. Or maybe just desperation. "Sir," Lyra protested, "if we shut down the monitoring systems, we will have no way to track the drive's condition. If something goes wrong, we will not know until it is too late." "Something has already gone wrong," Vec said. "That is why we are here. That is why this human is here. We have tried everything else, Lyra. We have nothing left to lose." Lyra's hands clenched and unclenched. For a long moment, she did not move. Then she turned and gave the order. One by one, the screens went dark. The lights on the monitoring stations faded. The constant hum of the diagnostic systems fell silent. The engineering deck became quiet, more quiet than it had been in centuries. And in that silence, Taiho finally heard what he was looking for. He walked toward the drive. The other engineers moved aside, watching him with confusion and curiosity. He ignored them all. His entire focus was on the machine in front of him. When he reached the base of the drive, he stopped. He looked at the metal surface for a moment. Then he removed his gloves and placed his bare hands against it. The metal was cold. Colder than it should have been. But that was not what Taiho felt. What he felt was something deeper. Something that traveled through the metal and into his skin, and up his arms and into his heart. The machine was talking to him. It was not words. Machines did not use words. But they had their own language, a language of vibrations and pressures and temperatures. A language that Taiho had learned to speak long ago, back when he was a young boy helping his grandfather FIX tractors on their small farm in Korea. His grandfather had taught him the secret. Machines are alive, the old man had said. Not like people or animals, but alive in their own way. They feel pain. They feel fear. They know when something is wrong. And if you learn to listen, they will tell you everything. Taiho closed his eyes and listened. The drive spoke of power beyond measure, of forces that could bend space and time. It spoke of journeys across the stars, of millions of souls carried safely from one end of the galaxy to the other. It was proud of its work. It loved its purpose. But beneath that pride, there was something else. Pain. Small and hidden, but growing. Something was wrong deep inside, and the drive had been trying to tell someone for a long time. But no one had listened. No one had cared. They had only looked at their screens and their sensors and their numbers. And the numbers had said everything was fine. The numbers had lied. Taeho moved his hands across the surface of the drive. He felt every joint, every seam, every tiny imperfection in the metal. He worked slowly, methodically, letting his fingers guide him where they wanted to go. Hours passed. Kale brought him water, but Taeho barely noticed. His entire world had shrunk to the machine beneath his hands. Nothing else existed. The other engineers watched in silence. Some had gone to rest, but many stayed, unable to look away from the strange sight of a human touching the quantum fold drive with his bare hands. It was ridiculous. It was primitive. It was something their species had stopped doing millions of years ago, that they could not stop watching. Finally, near the end of the third hour, Taeho stopped. His hands rested on a section of the drive that looked exactly like every other section. There was nothing special about it. No warning lights, no damage panels, nothing to show that anything was wrong. But Taeho knew. He opened his eyes and turned to face Lyra. "Sector 7G," he said. "There is a coupling joint there. Very small. Not important enough for your sensors to watch closely." Lyra frowned. "What about it?" "It has a fracture. Very tiny. Invisible to your machines. But it is there, and it is growing. Every time the drive activates, the fracture gets a little bigger. Soon it will break completely, and when it does, the entire drive will tear itself apart." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lyra laughed. But this time, her laugh sounded different. It sounded nervous. "Impossible," she said. "A fracture in a coupling joint would show on our deep scans. We would have detected it months ago." Taeho shook his head. "Your scans are not deep enough. The fracture is inside the metal itself, hidden in a way your sensors cannot see. But I felt it. The machine told me where it hurts." Lyra stared at him. Her four hands hung loose at her sides. "You felt it," she repeated. "The machine told you, yes. You are asking me to believe that you can communicate with machines through your hands." Taeho met her gaze calmly. "I am not asking you to believe anything. I am not asking you to believe anything. I am not asking you to believe anything. I am telling you where the problem is. Whether you check it or not is your choice." Commander Vec stepped forward. His yellow eyes moved from Taeho to Lyra and back again. "We have 4 cycles left," he said. "If he is wrong, we lose nothing by checking. If he is right, we save 3 million lives." Lyra was silent for a long time. Then she turned and began walking towards Sector 7G. Taeho followed, and his hands finally stopped trembling. Sector 7G was deep inside the ship, far from the main engineering deck. To reach it, they had to travel through tunnels that had not been walked in hundreds of years. The passages were narrow and dark, built for maintenance robots that no longer existed. Taeho led the way with a small light in his hand. Behind him came Kale, then Lyra, then 3 other engineers who had been ordered to join them. The chief engineer had not wanted to come, but Commander Vec had insisted. The air grew colder as they went deeper. Strange sounds echoed through the tunnels. The hum of the quantum fold drive was everywhere, vibrating through the walls and floors and ceiling. Taeho could feel it in his teeth. "No one has been down here in living memory," Kale said. His orange eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "These maintenance tunnels were sealed off generations ago. We use robots for everything now." "Why?" Taeho asked. "Because it is more efficient." Robots do not get tired. They do not make mistakes. They do not complain. Kale paused. And they do not feel pain when something goes wrong. Taiho thought about that. His species had robots too, but humans still insisted on doing much of the work themselves. They liked to touch things. They liked to feel them. Maybe that was primitive. Or maybe it was wise. After 2 hours of walking, they finally reached Sector 7-G. It was a small chamber, barely large enough for all 6 of them to stand. The walls were covered in pipes and cables and strange devices that Taiho could not name. In the center of the room sat the coupling joint, a cylinder about the length of his forearm, made of a metal that shimmered with faint blue light. Lyra pushed past Taiho and approached the joint. She pulled out a scanner and ran it over the surface. Numbers and symbols appeared on the screen, and she studied them carefully. "Nothing," she said. "The joint is functioning within normal parameters. Temperature is stable. Pressure is stable. There is no sign of any damage." Taiho did not respond. He walked to the coupling joint and knelt beside it. He could hear the scream more clearly now. It was louder here, sharper, like a knife cutting through the air. The pain was very close. He reached into his bag and pulled out his grandfather's wrench. The old tool felt warm in his hand, like greeting an old friend. Lyra watched him with narrow eyes. "What is that?" "A wrench," Taiho said. "I can see that it is a wrench. But it looks ancient. Why would you bring such a primitive tool to work on a quantum fold drive?" Taiho smiled slightly. "Because sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones." He lifted the wrench and tapped it gently against the coupling joint. Once, twice. The sound rang out in the small chamber. It was wrong. Hollow, like tapping on something that was empty inside. Taiho looked at Lyra. "Did you hear that?" The chief engineer frowned. "It sounded normal to me. It should ring true, like a bell. But it does not. There is something broken inside. Something your scanners cannot see." Lyra's frown deepened. She turned back to her scanner and adjusted the settings. "I will run a deep frequency scan. It takes longer and uses more power, but it can see things that standard scans miss." "Do it," Tojo said. The scan took almost an hour. During that time, no one spoke. Taiho kept his hand on the coupling joint, feeling the vibrations, listening to the machine's pain. The other engineers stood in silence, watching and waiting. Finally, Lyra's scanner beeped. She looked at the screen. Her 4 hands began to shake. "Impossible," she whispered. "What is it?" Kale asked. Lyra did not answer. She just stared at the screen, her eyes wide with shock. Taiho stood and walked to her side. He looked at the image on the scanner. There it was. A tiny fracture, deep inside the metal of the coupling joint. It was so small that it was almost invisible, no wider than a human hair. But it was there, spreading slowly through the material like a crack in thin ice. "If this fracture had grown just a little more," Lyra said softly, "the joint would have failed. The pressure from the drive would have torn it apart. And when that happened," she stopped and swallowed hard, "the feedback would have destroyed the entire drive. The ship would have been torn in half." "How much time do we have?" Taiho asked. Lyra checked her scanner again. "At the current rate of growth, the joint will fail in less than 1 cycle. Maybe sooner. 1 cycle. Less than 1 day. If they had waited any longer, if they had continued to trust their sensors and their numbers, everyone would have died." Kale looked at Taiho with new eyes. "You heard this? Through your hands?" "The machine told me," Taiho said simply. "I just listened." The engineers exchanged glances. For the first time since Taiho had arrived, there was no doubt in their faces. There was only wonder. "Can you fix it?" Commander Vec's voice came through the communication system, loud and urgent. He had been listening the whole time. "Can you repair the joint before it fails?" Taiho looked at the coupling joint. The repair would be delicate. Very delicate. The quantum fold drive could not be fully shut down, or the ship would lose its position and fall into the gravity well immediately. He would have to work on a live system, with reality-bending energies flowing through it. One wrong move, and the joint would shatter. One small mistake, and everyone would die. "I can try," Taiho said. "Trying is not good enough," Vec said. "I need to know if you can do it." Taiho was silent for a moment. He thought about his life, about all the machines he had fixed, about all the problems he had solved. He thought about his grandfather's hands, rough and scarred like his own, and the lessons the old man had taught him. Then he thought about 3 million souls, waiting for him to save them. "Yes," he said, "I can do it." He took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by something else. Focus, determination, the quiet calm that came before a difficult job. He turned to face the coupling joint and began to work. The repair was the hardest thing Taiho had ever done in his life. The coupling joint was small, but the forces flowing through it were beyond imagination. The quantum fold drive pulsed with energy that could bend space itself. Every few seconds, waves of power surged through the system, making the metal vibrate and shift. If Taiho's hands were in the wrong place at the wrong time, they would be torn apart. He worked slowly, carefully. Each movement was planned before he made it. He had asked Lyra to explain the timing of the power surges, and she had given him a small device that beeped a warning 3 seconds before each one came. 3 seconds was not much time, but it was enough. The other engineers could not help him. Their hands were too large, too clumsy for this kind of work. Lyra had 4 arms, but each of her fingers was thicker than Taiho's wrist. Kale's hands were thin and quick, but they shook too much under pressure. The floating creature made of smoke had no hands at all. Only the human could do this. Only the primitive from the backwater world. Taiho found the irony amusing, but he did not have time to laugh. The first step was to stabilize the fracture. He used a special compound that Lyra had given him, a liquid that hardened instantly when exposed to the energy of the drive. He applied it carefully along the edges of the crack, sealing the damage before it could spread further. The device on his wrist beeped. A surge was coming. Taiho pulled his hands back and pressed himself against the wall of the chamber. The coupling joint glowed bright blue as power rushed through it. The whole room shook. Then the light faded, and Taiho went back to work. Hours passed. Taiho lost track of time. The only things that existed were his hands and the machine beneath them. He fell into a rhythm. Work, beep, retreat. Work, beep, retreat. Over and over again. His muscles began to ache. His eyes grew heavy. Sweat dripped down his face and fell onto the metal floor. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Kale sat in the corner of the chamber, watching in silence. The young alien had not moved in hours. His orange eyes followed every motion of Taiho's hands, studying them like they were the most fascinating thing in the universe. "How do you do it?" Kale asked suddenly. Taiho did not look up. "Do what?" "Stay so calm. You are working on a machine that could kill you at any moment. One mistake, and you die. But your hands are completely steady." "How?" Taiho was silent for a moment. His fingers continued to move, adjusting a tiny component deep inside the coupling joint. "When I was young," he said, "my grandfather told me a story. He said that long ago, humans were hunters. We lived in forests and grasslands, and we survived by catching animals that were faster and stronger than us." "How did you catch them?" "By being patient, by being still. The animals could hear our heartbeats, smell our fear. If we were afraid, they would run away. So we learned to control our fear. We learned to make our hearts beat slowly and our hands stay steady, even when we were facing something that could kill us. Kale thought about this. Your species evolved to be calm under pressure. We evolved to survive, Taiho said. Fear is useful when you need to run away. But sometimes running is not an option. Sometimes you have to stand still and do what needs to be done. The device beeped again. Taiho retreated, waited for the surge to pass, and returned to his work. The final step was the most dangerous. The fractured section of the joint needed to be replaced entirely. Taiho had to remove the damaged piece and install a new one, all while the drive was still running. It was like changing the tire on a car while driving at full speed. He took a deep breath. His hands hovered over the coupling joint. He could feel the energy humming beneath the metal, waiting to destroy him if he made even the smallest error. Then he began. His movements were fast but precise. He released 4 clamps, pulled out the damaged section, inserted the new piece, and secured the clamps again. The whole process took less than 10 seconds. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the coupling joint began to glow brighter and brighter until Taiho had to look away. The light filled the chamber, so intense that it seemed to burn through his closed eyelids. And then it stopped. The glow faded. The coupling joint sat quietly in its place, humming with gentle power. The scream that Taiho had heard for so many hours was finally silent. He let out a long breath and sat down on the floor. His whole body was shaking now, the exhaustion finally catching up with him. He had been working for 9 hours without rest. Lyra's scanner beeped. She looked at the readings and made a sound that Taiho had never heard before. It took him a moment to realize it was laughter. The joint is stable, she said. The fracture is sealed. The drive is... She paused and checked the readings again. The drive is operating at full capacity. Better than before, even. The communication system crackled. Commander Vek's voice filled the chamber. All hands, this is the captain. The quantum fold drive has been repaired. We are moving out of the gravity well. I repeat, we are moving out of the gravity well. We are safe. Somewhere far away, Taiho could hear cheering. 3 million voices raised in joy and relief. 3 million souls who would live to see another day. Kale knelt beside him. You did it, the young alien said. His voice was filled with wonder. You actually did it. Taiho nodded slowly. He was too tired to speak. Lyra approached them. For a long moment, she just looked at Taiho with an expression he could not read. Then she did something unexpected. She bowed her head. I was wrong about you, she said. I was wrong about your species. You are not primitives. You are something else entirely. Something we had forgotten existed. What is that? Taiho asked. Lyra looked at his hands, scarred and calloused and covered in grease. People who remember how to listen. 2 days later, Taiho stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Drift, looking out at the stars. The gravity well was far behind them now, just a dark spot in the distance. The ship was alive again, carrying its 3 million souls toward their destination. Commander Vek stood beside him. The Galactic Concordat wants to give you a medal, the captain said. They want to hold a ceremony and broadcast it to every world in the galaxy. Taiho shook his head. I do not want a medal. What do you want? Taiho thought for a moment. A cup of coffee, and a shuttle back to my repair shop. Vek made a rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. You saved the largest ship in the galaxy, and all you want is coffee. It was a long day, Taiho said, and I have other ships waiting for me. They are not as big as this one, but they need help too. The captain nodded slowly. I understand. But know this, Park Taiho. You will always have a place on this ship. You will always be welcome among us." Taiho looked at his hands. They were still now, as steady as they had always been. But he knew they would tremble again someday. They would tremble when they felt another machine in pain, calling out for someone to listen. And when that day came, he would answer. He smiled and turned away from the stars. "I will remember," he said. "But right now, I really do need that coffee."